Mission Impossible. Oh, sorry, I meant Mission Impossible. Surprisingly, I never really grew up with any of these movies. I mean, I have heard about them, don't get me wrong, but for the weirdest, longest time, I'd never done a sit down to any of the Mission Impossible movies. However, it wasn't until 2023 when I watched Dead Reckoning, and this year when I recently watched Part 2, both of which inspired me to actually sit down and watch the entire Mission Impossible series, movies 1 through 8.
No, that can't possibly be possible. Can it?
I've been so obsessed with Mission Impossible lately. It really needs no introduction to get the gist of what this series is all about. These movies are so off the wall, so exciting, so intense, and dare I say, most impossible to do. Each and every one of them follow the same formula, revolving around a team of highly skilled agents led by Ethan Hunt, aka Tom Cruise, who undertake multiple impossible missions that involve elaborate heists, intricate plans, and high-stakes scenarios. But it's the execution of said formula that makes most of these movies stand out as their own unique, fun adventures. But some definitely pull this off better than others. And that's what I'm gonna be doing today. One big ranking / review of all 8 movies and what exactly they have to offer. So, without further ado, let's get this mission of ranking all these movies started. Beginning with the weakest outing of the series, which I actually don't think is bad by any means, so I guess I can't use my regular endless trash meme.
You know what? This is actually okay territory.
Mission Impossible 2 has kinda had a bad rap among the general public. It's pretty unanimously seen as the worst Mission Impossible movie. I watched it as a first-timer, coming right off the heels of the first movie, and yeah, it was pretty mid. That's not to say I didn't hate myself watching it. Keep in mind, I'm calling this the weakest in the franchise, not the worst, because worst implies the movie is bad, which I don't think it is, at least in my opinion. This was definitely around the time the series was trying to find its footing and see exactly what would stick out. This movie was directed by John Woo, the director of Face Off and Silent Night, and he delivers his signature style of slow motion, over-the-top dramatic action set pieces and sequences. And it makes for a movie that, while fun, is the most disconnected of the entire franchise totally. It definitely feels like this one is trying to amp up the stakes and increase the scope and size of the story, without fully taking into account said story and the characters that matter within it. It has a lot of story flaws regarding the Chimera, a new weapon the team has to uncover, as well as a pretty forced romance plot point in between. Now don't get me wrong, I think there was plenty to enjoy in this movie. They definitely go overboard with a lot of the fight sequences, but they were still pretty fun. Especially the climax between Ethan and Sean Ambrose, played by Dougray Scott, and Ethan kicks the sand, grabs his gun, and shoots him point blank. There's also the lab break-in sequence in the second act, the motorcycle chase, and disagree with me all you want, but I kinda like the hardcore rock version of the Mission Impossible theme. Admittedly, it does feel like something you'd hear from a direct-to-video Disney sequel where a rock version of one of the original film's classic songs play. Call all this cheesy, but I don't know, I kinda dug it. There's a lot to enjoy, but not a whole lot happens to move the overarching story in a natural direction. But even then, I thought it was pretty okay. And like, if this is the weakest entry in the franchise, I think that says a lot about the track record of these movies.
Shut it! That's my wife you're talking to!
Mission Impossible 3 is another weird one in the franchise. I think this is a very good movie, better than the second film, with a few fatal flaws to keep it back from being great. J.J. Abrams directed this movie, and credit to him for injecting fresh energy into the franchise and laying some of the groundwork for the series' success to come. Ethan Hunt is trying to live a normal life with his fiancée, played by Michelle Monaghan, while chasing a destructive MacGuffin. This movie is the introduction to Simon Pegg as Agent Benji, and it also features the late Philip Seymour Hoffman as arms dealer Owen Davian. His performance is just terrific, particularly in his confrontation with Ethan on a plane, where Davian turns the tables on Hunt as he's being dangled by an open bay door. Another smart Abrams hire was bringing in music composer Michael Giacchino, the guy who would go on to compose the music for the next Mission Impossible movie. And he absolutely nails the score. It's exciting, it's gripping, and intense when it needs to be. This guy has always been one of my favorite music composers. I hope he never stops with his job. But with all that said, the film does lack memorable action set pieces, most of the supporting cast is kinda forgettable, and the overall tone is kinda grim, with a ragey Hunt and an otherwise pretty underwhelming climax. However, it does showcase another element of the series that would become a signature Tom Cruise stunt in his career: running like hell. I am not joking when I say that this movie has the best Tom Cruise running sequences. A good movie overall, but I definitely wouldn't go far as to call it an underrated masterpiece. Solid, but there are other movies in the series that are much better. And now we've come to the most recent installment in the Mission Impossible series, The Final Reckoning. Watch this part with awareness because I'm going to be spoiling a lot. I've been seeing a lot of divisiveness surrounding this movie. From what I've been hearing, the general consensus seems to be that it's still good, but not nearly as gripping as its predecessor or earlier installments in the series. And after watching it, yeah, I can kinda see why. Look, this movie remains really good for the most part, but there's a lot of problems with it. The first half hour or so is definitely the weakest stretch in the movie, as it struggles to not just remind audiences of what happened in the last movie, but it also tries to loop in elements from previous films before leaning into maybe the most underwhelming kick into the main theme music. There's also Luther's death scene, which should have been a really emotional moment, yet the sequence is so contrived that you don't really get that much sense of suspense or resonance. Like, he's dying anyway, and he's living in an underground cell for some reason. Ethan can speak to him, but can't reach him. He's stuck with a bomb that he has to deactivate on his part of the cell, so he can save the city, but not himself. I don't know, it's kinda weird. The film thankfully does improve from there, but there's still a heavy reliance on cute but very fan service heavy flashbacks, flash forwards, and exposition to keep interrupting the flow of the story as the film tries to pay off everything the rest of the series had been setting up. And it falls kind of flat, especially considering how the series found strength in its episodic nature, which is what made the previous movies fun, since you didn't have to pay too much attention to that many overarching plot details. The movie also falters in its cast. There's so many characters this movie has to juggle, and most of them don't really have a goal of their own. Benji, Paris, Erica Sloane, and the US Generals, they're just kinda on for the ride. Even Grace gets sidelined kinda hard, which is also pretty weird, especially since this movie implies some intimacy between her and Ethan, and then they don't do anything with them. I also think they should have killed off Ethan. When he falls out of the plane and his parachute catches fire and he's trying to put the entity in a hard drive, I thought for sure that they were going to kill him off. It would have made for such a really satisfying payoff to all of his and our adventures with him. But yeah, no, he's perfectly fine. Lame. So yeah, this movie has quite a bit of problems here and there. But at the end of the day, I still very much liked it. It's still Mission Impossible. It still delivers some of the best character moments and most exciting action sequences these movies are known for. The sequence of Ethan infiltrating the flooded Russian submarine in freezing waters is filled to the brim with suspense. The climax plane chase is also super exciting and very impressive, even though there's so much footage of Ethan hanging and maneuvering and keeping his balance on top of the plane that you find yourself thinking, well, that's the latest Tom Cruise stunt for me, far more than you should. Overall, is the movie perfect? No. Disappointing? Maybe, depending on your point of view. But I still think there was a lot to love here. It's a miraculously good conclusion to an amazing franchise. Just not quite as emotionally satisfying as I would have liked.
Special Agent
Mr. Hunt.
And here we are, the OG Mission Impossible movie. Compared to the later films in the series, this one is just a straightforward spy thriller. And it makes it fun to watch this movie and see the differences between it and the rest of the franchise. By the standards of this series, this one is slightly less filled with the high energy action and amazing Tom Cruise stunt work you'd normally expect. To me, that's what makes it stand out. It's a movie that's just doing its own original thing, not having to worry about being the best cinematic event of the year. And the film in general is really fun. Brian De Palma is the director of this film, and he was the same guy who directed Scarface and The Untouchables, and he delivers his directorial style in spades with tons of good dialogue and clever fake-outs and switcheroos that constantly keep you on the edge of your seat. Ethan is on the run in this one to clear his name and keep a list of undercover agents out of enemy hands. It's here we're introduced to both him and Luther Stickle, played by Ving Rhames. The action, choreography, and stunts are good. I don't think I need to tell you much from that front. The film's centerpiece is definitely the infiltration into the CIA headquarters computer room, which is a masterpiece of suspense, with sharp editing and Cruise selling the tension in every shot. It's not all amazing, like I think the movie is paced a little too fast, especially when we move into the third act, which I didn't think was quite as strong as the first two acts. There's some dated visual effects that weaken the climax a little bit, but not by much, and I was still able to enjoy it regardless. The film overall is very lo-fi compared to the films to come, like I said earlier, but it shows that you don't always need the latest Tom Cruise stunt to keep your audience engaged in the narrative. This is a great introduction to the Mission Impossible series for newcomers such as myself. It's a really fun time that still miraculously holds up almost a whole 30 years later. I highly recommend it.
Guys, she's going rogue!
Some people might be mad at me for putting Rogue Nation this low on the list. Just hold your horses, let me say what I need to say. This is a very good movie that requires your full attention and patience because there are a lot of details and plot points to pick from the character motivations to the twists and turns to the ending reveals. This is a very clever Mission Impossible film. It's also the first movie directed by Christopher McQuarrie, in my opinion, the Mission Impossible director. The action sequences are enticing as ever, with major standouts being the opening sequence with Ethan hanging onto a moving plane, the opera fight, the motorcycle chase, the underwater sequence, which is maybe the most nail-biting action scene in the whole film. The final battle involves Ethan outsmarting Solomon Lane, which is also very nail-biting. I love it when a character has to outsmart the bad guy. It offers that extra intensity. Alec Baldwin's delivery of the line,
"Hunt is the living manifestation of destiny,"
is among some of the rawest line readings of all time in my opinion. Overall, this movie works on a number of levels, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't fully drawn in by the whole product. This movie is the introduction of Elsa Faust, played by Rebecca Ferguson. And I thought she was perfectly fine in this movie, and she does really shine in some of the later installments, but there was something about her performance here that felt a little restrained from her fully breaking out, that it made it kinda hard to buy into her and Ethan's relationship. I also thought the story in general wasn't quite as gripping as some of the other Mission Impossible films. It felt a little repetitive and akin to earlier installments and their formulas. Once again, I was still able to enjoy the film for what it was for the most part, but I personally didn't see this one as one of the biggest all-timer installments in the series. I'm sure I'll get on your guys' level about this movie with a couple more rewatches, but this is where it stands for now. Great film all around though.
I thought you two had fallen out.
I mean, it's hard to hate Fallout. How could you? This is generally ranked as one of, if not the best Mission Impossible movie. And I get why. It's really good. I wouldn't rank it that high, but I do think it's great. The story, the team, the villain, the action set pieces, everything for the most part remains hugely effective from start to finish. With the way Christopher McQuarrie masterfully finds a way to string one unique action set piece into another, it more than justifies its 2.5-hour runtime. This movie also includes its best villain, a sly, unflappable, witting, fist-throwing Henry Cavill, who constantly steals every action sequence he's involved in and keeps Hunt hot on his heels. This movie also features the franchise's best score. Lorne Balfe directed the music for this movie, and he would later be brought back for movie number 7. The movie also features the most gripping third act of the whole series, with a sensational helicopter chase and cliff-top fight against a literal ticking clock. All of this stuff is really good and makes the film a great time for the most part, and they kinda make up for the slightly repetitive plot structure. So the film finds Hunt trying to stop nuclear-grade plutonium from falling into the Syndicate's hands. That threat of a nuclear fallout is like the conflict of Part 4 again, the same villainous group and the return of the main villain from Part 5. Hell, even the helicopter climax is kind of an echo of Part 1's climax. I don't know, I just kind of found the story to be a bit less engaging than some of the other previous installments, but it still rules on literally every other level, and I'm more than happy to place it in my top 3 favorite Mission Impossible films.
Let's fucking go.
Alright, now we're getting into the really good shiz. Our runner-up is Ghost Protocol. And as you may already know, this is where the series really got good, with stronger ensembles, far more spectacular action, and a hilarious sense of humor. This movie was directed by Brad Bird, the same dude behind The Incredibles and Iron Giant. And man, it's honestly insane how near-perfect his skills at crafting those other animated action films translate to the live-action medium. Michael Giacchino returns to compose the music after the third movie, proving yet again why he's one of the best score composers in the world. These guys go hand in hand in making almost every scene feel as exciting and dramatic when it needs to be. It's become pretty easy to remember the Mission Impossible franchise for what it is now, defined mostly by massive globe-trotting set pieces. But this was the movie that really established that legacy. Sure, there were big gigantic set pieces in the previous 3 films, but those sequences really could have happened anywhere. Scaling the Burj Khalifa or blowing up the Kremlin can only happen in their specific locations. That's the magic of good writing, believable acting, directing, and amazing cinematography. Speaking of which, I just want to say that I legit could not breathe during the sequence of Ethan scaling the Burj Khalifa. Like, there is no way he can still be able to climb that thing and attempt to swing back inside with only one glove. Only Tom Cruise, man. On top of all the action, they also start to play around more with the characters and their motivations, making them a lot easier to root for this time around, rather than just generic protagonists trying to save the world. As a result, the movie feels a lot more personal than its predecessors, playing with both the humor and emotion in a way the series previously kinda neglected. That near-perfect mixture of wit, heart, and entertainment makes for such an incredibly fun experience. My only real nitpick with this movie is that I think it was a little too ambitious with some of the action. The first 2 acts involving the Kremlin threat are good, but the third act is where the action feels a little stale. Emphasis on little. There's still plenty of incredible stunts to be found, but I just thought the stakes of the conflict weren't as high as they were in the first 2 acts. But it's still no wonder that this movie became the template for the series moving forward. The first one of these movies to really earn its title. A truly unforgettable experience that I'll probably never forget in the years to come. However, there is one more movie on this list that I think is just a little more complete. And spoiler warning, it'll shock you. Yeah, Dead Reckoning just couldn't be upstaged by a successor. I've shockingly never seen anyone put this movie as their #1 favorite Mission Impossible movie. It's definitely somewhere within the top 5 or top 3, but I've never seen it in first place on anyone else's Mission Impossible rankings. I could have done the same thing, but this is my list, and to me, this was the most fun, most intense, most exciting film of the entire franchise. Before we get into the stuff I really love about this movie, I will say that my biggest problem with it is that it was a little too long. Like, part of what made the previous installments fun to watch is that everything they threw at you was pretty easy to understand, and felt like they suited the 2.5-hour runtime well. And this one is a little bit longer, with a couple scenes like the opening and even the climax that kinda drag. But other than that, oh man, is this a blast! As much as I enjoyed the action and stunt pieces, I think I found the espionage stuff a lot more compelling, as they're more laser focused on the characters and what makes them tick. This is the movie that introduces Grace, and I think she was a really nice addition to the cast because not only is Hayley Atwell a good actress, but her performance really sells Grace's notable fear of being a newbie to the team's game. This movie also introduces Paris, played by Mantis from the Guardians movies, and her character was also super fun to watch. Initially introduced as a ruthless henchwoman who ultimately defects from the villain's side and joins Ethan's group. This transformation is triggered by Ethan sparing her life after the alley fight, leading her to eventually find a new purpose and a sense of belonging with the IMF team. It's this type of stuff that got to me a lot more than the latest, still awesome as hell, Tom Cruise stunt. That's not to say this movie still delivers on all the fun action you'd expect from these movies. Stuff like the car chase, the motorcycle jump, and the collapsing train are some of the biggest highlights for me, especially the collapsing train sequence. It goes on for a little too long, admittedly, but it was nonetheless gut-wrenching to watch. Not to mention, it's a train, and if you know me. I also found the threat of the entity to be pretty interesting. I see a lot of people complaining about this aspect of the film, but to me, I like seeing this new approach of the series taking a step back from what we're usually accustomed to, by having a clear villainous presence, and instead challenging the audience to buy into this new antagonistic force that's essentially an AI. And realistically speaking, it does make sense. AI is getting much more advanced in our modern day world, and Ethan has outsmarted every single human antagonist up to this point. So fighting a sentient AI that has the ability to outsmart humankind is a smart direction. So yeah, I like the entity, sue me. This is the dramatic rise in stakes I was missing from the last two movies. The story was tight, the performances were great, the editing and cinematography were as top-notch as ever. It delivered for me on almost every cylinder. One of the best action films I've ever seen in my life. It's simply fantastic. Easily my pick for the best Mission Impossible movie. Feel free to disagree all you want. My opinion is not changing. So that was my Mission Impossible ranking. Ranking these films from worst to best was definitely hard to do, because they're all really good in their own way. 8 whole movies with such a consistent track record that all range from okay to fantastic. Every single one of them is on a level of quality that far exceeds most action films of our modern culture. I am really gonna miss Mission Impossible, but it was such a pleasure going on so many exciting missions with so many iconic and memorable characters. This franchise will always live in my heart for the rest of time. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. This video